Kate Miller, and I'm going to talk to you today about pinch coil head vessels. I have a BFA in printmaking, although I started out as a ceramics major. I am the current art educator at Hiawatha Elementary School. I am the Kansas Art Education Association's mentorship chair. I was a camp art director for 15 years, and I still do a lot of freelance work, working on art curriculums for privatized summer camps across the nation. I love answering questions. I love being able to help other art educators, so never hesitate to reach out. I did put my Twitter and Instagram handle up there, as well as some hashtags that you can follow to get in touch with me. And of course, you can find me here on Online Art Teachers K-12. So let's get to it, shall we? We are going to talk about kind of the process I go through with my students on creating these vessels and materials used and lots of different things. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. So I do like to use a stoneware body of clay. I have no issue with earthenware. I do actually love porcelain. I just happen to prefer stoneware. A lot of people ask me why, if I'm working with elementary school students. I surely don't fire to a cone 10. I do actually sometimes fire to a cone 10. We do use oxides at times, and the look of an oxide at a cone 10 is quite stellar. So that is part of the reason why I use stoneware. I do talk to the kids about, the different stages of clay, the different things that we need to do to make clay happen. But of course, their biggest fascination is the kiln. And I would never open my kiln this hot. So thank you, Google, for having some awesome photos of what it looks like when a kiln is red hot and firing, different type of pottery. So the one thing that I do like to do, I see my students once a week for about 60 minutes. And I talk to them probably a month prior before we start this project. I do this with fourth graders. So they can kind of have ideas going. Now, the image you're seeing right now was actually my teacher's aide this year. She was a junior in high school, homeschooled. But she wants to be an art teacher, so she came in to help me and to get a little bit of an education as well. So I do have my students do this as well, but we draw from all sides what the vessel is going to look like. It's really important because sculpture, as you all know, needs to be viewed in the round, and all sides should be interesting. That doesn't mean that you have to have something crazy on all sides of the pot, but it should be interesting. That could be a glaze choice, that could be a painting choice, that could be something carved in or added to the vessel. It just kind of depends on you. So here we've got a left, right, front, and back view, and you'll see as we look on how this changed and how this grew from what she first drew out, although it does stay fairly true to her sketch. Sometimes I get a little gruff from my students about having to draw something out that's going to be three-dimensional first, but we do wind up with better pots this way. And actually, we will sometimes break out the oil-based clay and practice making the pots before we ever get the ceramic clay out. I have found that sometimes leads to stronger pieces because they sort of problem solve issues that come up beforehand. And it just really helps out. I do this with younger kids too, different projects. So now here you can see kind of her pot as it was just getting finished. Lots of crazy details. I should add that my hometown, the town I teach in, has the oldest continuous Halloween parade and frolic in the nation, so spooky things tend to show up in the room, hence why she created a zombie. But you can see here that it is really very close to the sketch that she made. She did a great job with her finishing, and we'll talk about finishes later on. But this all just really pulls together, the oxides, the underglaze, using the clear coat. It just really makes her piece something that you would go and look at, and granted, it's a little grotesque. She refers to it as a monstrosity, but it is quite gorgeous and does a really lovely job of displaying so many different techniques. the uses of texture, the uses of line, the great use of the underglaze material as well as those oxides, kind of get that veining look. It really is it's just stellar. I couldn't stop looking at it once she had it created because it's a little gross, I'm not gonna lie to you, but it's very nicely done. And she's getting ready to take it some point this summer to an art show, and I'm hoping that it does well for her. But so creating these pieces, of course, we get out the stoneware. I do not limit kids to how much stoneware we use. I order several 100 pounds of clay a year. So it doesn't really matter. So basically we're going to start out by creating a pinch pot. You're going to see that I am using gloves here. For some reason, as I've aged, my tactile sensitivity has gone up a little bit. That and my hands dry out like mad. So I am using gloves here, but I've just made a pinch pot. I'm building the vessel up a little bit using Coil, which is why it's then a pinch coil technique. This you're going to see it starting out kind of, in just your basic general shape. That's going to change a lot as we go on. You can definitely make a wider pinch pot. You could make a taller pot as well. Just kind of depends on what you're doing. I am scoring. I am not slipping. I am using just some water to help connect those there. I'm using a tiny rolling pin just to kind of get that back into that nice spherical shape. Guess really it's more of a cylinder. Here you see me add a pinch pot to the side. It is out a little bit. I'm going to fill that with coils to create this snout. I'm creating a dragon here. Getting that basic shape is really kind of important. I would say that as I did this, and granted this is something I've done before, so I've had more practice, all in all, I think it's about 2.5 hours of work. So depending on how often you see your students, you may want to, make sure things are sacked really well, wet paper towels, damp boxes, things along those lines, to help keep that. I did the basic shapes and things in one night, and then went back a night or two later and to add the different textures and do some carving on the pot to let it stiffen up a bit. Here again, I'm doing additive. I'm creating the eyes and things. You can see where I get it wet. And then I'm using a kind of like a ball tool. You'll start seeing me create some texture on this. As you're looking inside, this is a little thick. I do trim it down. But when you have something like protruding out from your pot like this, I have to make sure that the weight is balanced. I do have a small piece of clay under the snout to ensure it doesn't sag. So it also will then kind of defy gravity basically once it's dry enough and when it's fired. So there I am adding a whole lot of texture. That is just kind of like a little ball tool that I'm going in and pressing into the clay. It doesn't have to be that fancy. You could use a straw, you could use a toothpick, different things like that. As a matter of fact, I do use straws around the eyes to help create some of that texture. I like to use oxides. And so because of this, having a highly textured surface really, really shows those off. And I'll have a finished piece at the end to show you that kind of shows you where that's going. A lot of this is added as well and put on. But like I said, I will remove some things. And you'll see right now the scales on the back aren't all that interesting. The horns are not all that interesting. But that will change. We're going to change that up here in a little bit. Again, if you're working with kids and you're doing this, you're going to want to put a sack over it, maybe 2. You want to keep it fairly moist, not so moist that it's going to become a soggy mess the next day. Getting it to a leather hard stage, though, is pretty much ideal once you have that basic figure made, which is what I was going with here. I am using a turntable. It's not necessary. It is helpful. I know a lot of people who use masonite bats or even like canvas board to help students create and be able to move easily and turn their pieces. All those are great things to do to make that happen and help create the piece that they're going to want. You can see my other dragon in the background. Like I said, we'll kind of get to that in a second here. The other thing to know too is like you can totally mess this up. It's not 2.5 hours isn't that much time in the grand scheme of life and creating. So if you mess up, it's not that big of a deal. I tell kids that all the time, that with clay, we've got a lot of wiggle room for forgiveness. I could have lobbed off this nose, put a little wet paper towel in it, let it soak it encased in a sack for a while, and gone on and re-added a nose if I wanted to. So just having that flexibility and understanding that, time goes on and it doesn't have to be perfect is kind of nice and kind of freeing for kids. So then I'm going back in the next day. Those are some different tools that I'm using, and I am kind of cleaning this up, and I'm actually adding some more texture. So it's dry enough now that I can flip it to the side to get kind of underneath. I really am not kidding when I say that every side matters. I like to texture clear to the bottom. I make sure that if somebody's in a show and someone wants to pick it up, they can, and they're still going to find a high level of craftsmanship and a high level of detail everywhere that they look. So I'm using various tools here. I'm probably using a loop, but I also have these awesome wax tools that I love to use to help create texture. But again, it doesn't have to be that fancy. There are so many different things that you can do. That can actually be a fun thing to do as well. If you give a kid a slab of clay and allow them just to experiment with creating texture using different materials, because you can get some really cool results with different things. I definitely go through stores and look at different things and be like, oh, what would that look like in clay? I do make my own sprig molds and things along those lines as well. So now you can see the carving on the horns, the different carving on the different types of scales, leaving some areas smooth to help really bring a contrast and depth to the different areas, which will, again, when this gets oxide on it, will really pop. I am planning to take this one to a cone 10. I do not believe by the time this will be out that it will be done, because this will have to go through a slow drying process. I do not rush firing at all. Most of your explosions that you have in your kiln, as a matter of fact, almost 100% of your explosions are actually due to moisture. Some people are under the mistaken idea that has to do with air bubbles, and I'm not saying that you can't have some issues in there with such things, but it's moisture. And a moisture explosion is just a sad thing because it looks like a bomb went off. And then you're going to see this little guy is going in, even though he is wet. It's actually just staying in there to dry because I created this after school's out, and I wanted to make sure that it was in a safe place. But it actually had dried for 2 weeks underneath a plastic bag. So here's the other dragon that I had made earlier. You can see after it's been fired, even then it shows the texture. This is with some iron oxide on it. This is an iron oxide to a low fire, to an O, I believe it fired to an O5. So it still keeps that kind of red look. But when you fire it to a 10, it looks almost like bone. So texture, like I said, I adore texture. I love texture. I think it is a great thing. There are definitely amazing tools that you can buy. That's probably $100 worth of tools there, but it's not necessary. You'd be amazed what you can do with the toothpick, some straws, things like even paper clips and things to create different textures to make a piece come to life. Here you can see those kind of hole pushes that I did, as well as the texture of the straw up there by the eye. That is all created just with a straw. On the left, you can see the Groot there was done with just some line work. On the right, we have some burnishing to kind of give it a skull kind of look. Burnishing, if you don't know, is when you take a flat piece of something. You can do a stone, you can do metal, and when it's leather hard, kind of move it around. So this is just funny. This piece is from the first year I ever taught this with the fourth graders. At that time, we just did them as pinch pots. I do like to give them the option of having soil and grass seeds. So 2 years ago now, I got sent this photo from a senior who was on my forensics team, and she's like, "Look what I still have." And I died laughing because of a couple of reasons. One, that she still had it, and it still had its dead hair in it. But also something a professor told me once: if you have ceramic and you don't want anybody to see it ever again, you need to destroy it because it'll last forever. This is a fourth grader's pot. We did add some giant doll eyes to this using E6000. The eyes they had were fabulous, but they really thought this was hilarious, and I have to agree. It just really made it kind of cartoony. That is some underglaze work on there. Here's some that were growing grass, so a little bit like a chia head. And a lot of kids really enjoy adding that to it. That's just, that was burnished. That's why it's so smooth. This was a student's work who took it kind of beyond and created their pot into a full chameleon, which was pretty fun. These are using some acrylic paint, and here's some more of some acrylic paint. So you can see also the difference. Like, I truly let them just go for whatever they are feeling like creating, although it does seem like I took a bunch of pictures with things with mustaches. I love this little thing. I think he's adorable. Also, you can take acrylic and you can use washes to make it look more like underglaze when you're doing a cold finish. That was some glaze. Not sure why that went sideways on us. Sorry about that. So here are some other finishes that can be done. So there we go. Some nice just glaze. That's Amico's amber. It turned out really pretty cool. I hadn't used it before and actually really kind of adore it now. Again, this was my TA's underglazes, oxides, and some clear coat. And that layering, you get that real kind of thin dying skin look. Here, these are underglazes with some 05 glaze as well. I do talk to kids about copyright. Groot was made by one of my forensics kids, so he was actually in my classroom for something else and wanted to make a pot. These are, again, acrylic, kind of a heavy-bodied acrylic, honestly, to paint those and create that kind of bright matte look. But you can do a lot of different finishes and make that happen. So I really hope that this kind of quick, brief overview helped you out. And please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. Thanks a lot.